Okay, and I believe we are live now on Facebook. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a special event going on right now. This is called Tsismisan Talk Story, and Tsismisan actually means gossip in Tagalog. And the point of this event is really to highlight the issues that are affecting our community, specifically the Filipino community, when it comes to the census, to COVID-19, and to legal issues. And it's a series of talks, actually, like talk stories that we have with leaders in these different fields. And we're going to have them on different days coming up. But today's focus is going to be legal issues. And this is an interesting topic because it doesn't just affect us, but it affects all kinds of communities. So I think it'll resonate with a lot of people. And I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the people that put this event together. It was my honor to be the moderator today. I'm Annalisa Burgos, by the way. I host the Good Morning America, Good Morning Hawaii weekends on KITV4. So it's good to be part of this because I like to know about these issues and talk about issues that are affecting our community. And our partners are the Filipino Complete Count Committee, FYLPRO, and Hawai'i Filipino Lawyers Association. So thank you so much. And they're concurrently actually doing Facebook Live as well on their respective pages. So be sure to like all the pages, especially the Filipino Complete Count Committee Facebook page, because that's where you can learn about all of the issues we're discussing, as well as the future talk stories that we're going to have. And if you have a chance, definitely like, because you will get some prizes, I hear. So that's another incentive. And then also, if you have any questions, we're going to try to make time for a Q&A with our experts today. But if we don't, it's okay. You can reach out to them separately after this Facebook Live, and then you can always direct your questions to them. But I wanted to introduce them so that you have a chance to learn who they are in their fields of expertise. First, let's start with Annie Sokol. She is originally from Mindanao in the Philippines, and she speaks Tagalog and Visayan. She is currently a partnership specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau, and her role is really to educate and encourage the community to participate in this very important count of our community. So, of course, Filipinos are considered one of the hardest to count. So that's why we're having these types of discussions. Next week, let's introduce attorney Philip Duresa. He is an experienced family law attorney and litigator and has represented numerous domestic violence victims in restraining order, divorce, and paternity proceedings before the Hawaii Family Court. He also worked in immigration law, helping domestic violence and violent crime victims secure immigration relief. And he's a graduate of Cornell University and the University of Iowa College of Law. Welcome, Phil. And finally, last but not least, is attorney Rhoda Ayabes Alvarez. She is an attorney with 25 years of experience in family law, U.S. and immigration law, business law, and Philippine law. And she's licensed to practice here in Hawaii, also in New York and the Philippines. And she is a graduate of Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines, as well as the University of London in the UK. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Looking forward to a very great discussion ahead. Okay, everyone is good? You can hear me okay? I wanted to actually just lay out the ground rules. I wanted this to be kind of not so formal. I know usually when I do interviews, it's very formal. It's for a TV show, but this is meant to be a talk story, a chismisan. So hopefully we can loosen up as we go, because I wanted to give people a chance to really relate to the topics we're talking about. So we're going to break it up into different segments. And the first topic I wanted to lead is how the state of law is here in Hawaii. Now, we know we've been under a lockdown. The pandemic has kind of affected all facets of life for the past 2 months, but the courts are still going, and we want to hear from Phil about what is the status right now of the legal system here in Hawaii. Phil.
Hi. So basically, the courts are still open and are still accessible. The main difference is the procedures with respect to accessing the court may vary depending on your particular case. So, for example, in family court, where I primarily practice, In custody and divorce cases, a person may file their documents by email, and court appearances and hearings are done through video or phone. In contrast, though, if you are filing a temporary restraining order in family court, that still needs to be done through in person, and the hearings are also in person as well. A good idea in terms of trying to figure out, how to access the court is to actually call the court. And the slide that I have there shows the various phone numbers for the courts, state courts in Oahu. For information regarding the courts in the neighbor islands, you can visit the Hawaii website, judiciary website at www.courts.state.hi.us, and all of the information there is going to be listed.
And quick follow-up for you, Phil. We've been hearing that because the courts were delayed in the beginning of this pandemic, how much backup is there? Should we expect to wait several months for cases to be heard?
It's really case by case. There's certain trials. So for trials, they've been postponed through June. But for non-trial hearings, they've actually been happening somewhat on a regular basis, but maybe just with a little bit of a delay. So it kind of depends on what case you have. For things like restraining orders, because they're kind of considered more of an essential legal proceeding, that really hasn't changed. If you file your restraining order, you get a hearing 14 days, and that still hasn't really changed. But for certain ones, like trials, they've been postponed through June. Again, the best way to sort of resolve that, I think, is just calling the particular court that your case is in and sort of talking to the people there, because I think they can give you a better idea of what the timeframes may be for your particular case in question.
All right, good advice here. Thanks for that, Phil. Then let's kick off our first big topic, which is immigration. And I know that's a huge issue for our community. Let's turn it over to Rhoda. What we're going to do is we're going to give scenarios, typical scenarios that these two experts have had in terms of their clients, and then hopefully the people that are watching, you can relate and you can kind of apply the advice perhaps to your situation. So Rhoda, the first scenario we have is, say I was fired from my job for whatever reason, my hotel job, and I am a conditional permanent resident. Am I eligible to apply for unemployment benefits considering my immigration status, and will it be affected because I'm applying?
Hi, Annalisa. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all our viewers. Kumusta po kayong lahat diyan? So to answer your question, number one, can he apply for unemployment benefits? The answer is yes. And the next question is, will this impact his immigration status? The answer is, it depends. Okay, so if he was working with an employment authorization that was valid at the time that he worked and at the time that he applied for unemployment benefits, then he would be entitled to it without negatively impacting his immigrant status. But if he was working without employment authorization, let's say he's an undocumented alien, that would constitute fraud if he applied for the benefit and he worked without authorization. In your scenario, you said that he had a conditional permanent residence. So as long as he was authorized to work within that period, then it shouldn't affect him negatively.
Mm-hmm. And we've heard in the news about some changes that President Trump may have made to the eligibility of people to get some of these benefits. What can you tell us about those news?
Annalisa, as soon as the pandemic was declared, President Trump signed into law the CARES Act. That was actually in March 27, 2020. And what he did was he expanded the unemployment insurance benefit. What he did was the law gave an additional $600 per week to the 648 maximum weekly benefit that an unemployed person will get in the state of Hawaii. Also, the law expanded the period when these unemployed can collect benefits from 26 weeks to an additional 13 weeks. So that effectively gives them up to almost 10 months of unemployment insurance benefits. Another thing that was added was because some people previously would not ordinarily qualify for unemployment benefits because they're self-employed and or they're independent contractors. So that law, CARES Act, was expanded to give benefits to those who would otherwise not qualify under state unemployment insurance nationwide.
Okay, well, good. A lot
So,
of information there.
right.
Okay, well, let me give you another scenario. Okay, so say my mom is a 70-year-old immigrant, and she actually was in the Philippines. She's been there for about more than a year. She actually wanted to return to Hawaii before the 1 year was up because she wanted to maintain her status. But now, because of COVID-19, because of the lockdown there, she can't find a flight to come back home here. So how will that affect her immigration status? Will she lose anything? What can we do so that she doesn't lose it?
Uh, what happened was because the lockdowns were declared nationwide in the Philippines, in different countries all over the world. Uh, a lot of flights were canceled. So people who had intended flights, despite their intention to return to the US so that they won't be in violation of their status, were prevented from flying in. So as a consequence, their legal status uh, might be affected. Okay, so what do you do when your legal status gets affected because you can't board your flight? Well, there are several things that we can think of because the flights are not yet available at this point. So there are several things and scenarios that we can think of and we can come up with during this chismisan. So one of the things that they can consider before boarding that flight, once the flights are back on, is to apply for a returning resident visa. The returning resident visa is a visa that is issued to you if for some reason beyond your control, you had the intention to return to the US, but are prevented from returning to the US before your period of authorized stay outside the US expires. So they can do that. That way, they have peace of mind when they actually board the flight and go through the ports of entry, for example, at the Inoue Airport, that they won't have any problems because they have a visa to enter. Now, if they haven't heard of the returning visa and they just board the next flight and present their expired green card at the port of entry, or they find out, the Customs and Border Patrol find out that the period of stay outside was more than 1 year, they can ask, if they are found to be inadmissible and won't be allowed into the US, they can ask to be allowed in and to present themselves before an immigration judge so that they can prove that they are not inadmissible because of the circumstances they found themselves in. I just want to say a caveat, Annalisa, that never should they return back to wherever they're coming from and say that they abandoned that they're abandoning their legal permanent residence, because sometimes when you get off a flight, you're still dazed and you're still in another time zone. So when you're being asked questions and you're being asked to sign documents, you don't know the legal consequences of those, and you might have just signed something that that requires you to go back to wherever you came from, like for example the Philippines, and then you didn't realize that you just abandoned your legal permanent resident status because of your fear that you will be detained here in Hawaii when they allow you to enter,
So it's
to
important to
fight.
articulate that once they are at the customs
Right.
agent.
Right. To fight your inadmissibility, because people are afraid to be detained because of the incidents of COVID also in detention centers. So yeah, so those are at least two scenarios that we can think of. The third scenario is if they're just allowed in. But with the strict immigration rules lately, we're not sure if that third scenario will pan out, because everyone knows there's a pandemic. Everyone knows that's the reason why they couldn't come in. But whether or not they can come in, just by everyone knowing that, I don't think it's enough.
And Rhoda, I know there's people there in the Philippines now that are telling me that the visa offices are closed or they're having trouble applying. What kind of relief can they get? How do they go about this process if they're finding that the offices are closed, for example?
Right. So, for example, right now, Manila is still in lockdown. So that means that the government offices, including the United States Embassy, is still closed. So many people want to get the first appointments so that they can, go to the embassy, get their visas, or apply for these reliefs that we're talking about. But at the last that we tried to do that, they're not open yet. So all of these scenarios are hanging um, when, because we don't know when they will open their offices. So right now, it's good to listen to information like what we're sharing. It's good to stay tuned to the um, websites of embassies, and yeah, wait and see until everything opens up, because at this point we're using information that's available to us, but anything can change as what we have seen going through this pandemic.
Let's turn now to Phil, because we talk about domestic violence, right? And family law is important because of what's happening with COVID-19 and people being stuck in their homes with their abusers, right? We know that domestic violence is an issue for our community, especially. So let me give you a scenario, Phil. My husband is abusive to me and my children. I used to be able to avoid it because we go to work and the children are at school, but now because of the lockdown, everyone is at home. So there's really no way to escape the abuse at this point. So what can I do? How can I protect myself?
Well, there's several options available for you. The way we usually try to address domestic violence for people who worked in the field is with certain sort of guidelines that we kind of just generally abide by. One of that is that the most important factor to consider is obviously the safety, your safety and the safety of your children. And another sort of principle that we follow is the notion that the domestic violence survivor is generally in the best position to decide what option to take because they are the ones who are most aware of the risks in their situation. But given that there are certain options out there that I think are important for people to be aware of. So one, I think calling the police is always an option, especially in situations where the threat of harm is immediate, because obviously the police can directly respond to that. Another option is filing a restraining order in family court. So a restraining order is an order that prohibits the abuser from contacting or being near the survivor and or their children. Essentially, what that does is if the restraining order is issued, then the abuser gets kicked out of the survivor's home and is prohibited from going to it. Another feature of the restraining order is that the survivor can call police to enforce the restraining order if it's being violated, and that can often lead to the abuser's arrest. I listed on this slide that we have on here the contact information for the TRO unit, the restraining order unit in the Oahu Family Court. And so there's that if you are looking to file a restraining order. If you call that number, TRO staff will work with you in filing your petition. Every family court has their own TRO unit, and just because of space issues, I didn't put it on there, but if you're interested in those, you can go to the Hawaii Judiciary website again, and that information will be on there. Another option is for the survivor to contact various domestic violence organizations for resources and help. And these organizations can provide a lot of resources, things like actually providing shelter or connecting them to somebody who can provide shelter. Some of them provide financial help. Some of them provide counseling and therapy. And some of them also provide DV advocacy services where an advocate can help the survivor work through whatever issues that they're dealing with, such as safety planning to leave the relationship in a safe way. Two of these organizations that I think have really good resources are the Domestic Violence Action Center and the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And on that slide there, I listed their contact information.
Phil, another scenario here. So my ex-partner and I have a child together. And under the custody order, I have our child on weekdays, and then he gets weekend visitations. And I'm afraid that my child could be exposed to COVID-19 because my ex-partner, actually used to work or does work on the front lines. So can I refuse to give him visitation due to this lockdown order, or do I have to go back to family court to adjust the custody order?
The quick question or the quick answer to your question is the latter. So custody and visitation orders are still valid enforceable orders, and Governor Ige's third proclamation regarding COVID on March 23, 2020 actually specifically exempts custody exchanges from the state's social distancing restrictions. And so there is still that expectation that these orders will have to be generally complied with. Obviously, in certain circumstances where there is, more of a threat of harm. So, for example, if one parent is admittedly showing symptoms of COVID, but still wants, and because of being a frontline worker, and still wants the visitation to take place, and the other parent is concerned about that, what the other parent can do is they can file a motion in family court to immediately suspend the visitation, and for these various reasons. Whether or not the court's going to grant it, obviously, is dependent on the court and depending on what evidence you can provide. But I think that is certainly a situation where the court will take the concerns of the other parent seriously, especially if the symptoms are real.
And it is, a situation where if you don't really know what your options are, is this a case where you should be consulting with some legal experts or some advice to get this done if it's really a big concern?
Yes, I think so, because it's a little bit more complicated. Usually when you file a motion to modify custody in court, before the pandemic, it may take you 2 to 3 months to get to your first hearing. And in this situation where there is, a need to get to the court faster, you will definitely need to sort of modify your motion for the court to address it faster. And that's just going through, an attorney to do that is probably the best way, because, they know what motions to file and what information to emphasize and highlight and things like that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, time is of the essence when you're dealing with health issues. So,
Right.
all right, thanks for that, Phil. Now we're going to segue into the census, because obviously this is all of these topics tie into not just COVID-19, but our participation in the census, the survey. So let's bring back Annie to talk about it. Annie, we've heard about the census. Some of us have already gotten our forms. I've filled out mine already. It took 5 minutes. Tell us about why it's so important for our community to actually fill this out and what benefits come to us because of it.
Thank you so much, Annalisa, and I'm glad you already filled out your census. And to those who already did, great job, you guys. Yay, that's
prize. Do I get a prize?
You should have a prize. We got the t-shirt, remember, that we like to plug into, and if you follow the Filipino Complete Count Committee, you might have a chance to win the t-shirt. So please follow that page for more information. But anyway, yes, it's very important for us to participate in the census, because it's only a once a decade count, and it's only this one chance for us to be counted the result of the census this 2020 will affect us until the next 10 years, so until 2030. And if we are not counted, then we missed out on that 10 years, right? And the census is mandated by the Constitution, and it is really, we've been doing this since 1790, and this is for the purpose of making sure that we have the right representation in Congress, and also during the redistricting for our state local boundaries, and also for the distribution of over $675 billion of federal funding that comes into our communities for so many purposes. We're talking healthcare, Medicaid and Medicare for our lolas and lolas, quality education for our children, transportation, emergency response. There are so many ways that the census touches our lives in a daily, almost in a daily actually. So if you're using the road, we need more roads or better roads. So that's, if you want better roads, then fill out the census.
And we got the card. I know some of us have gotten the notice, and you go online. What other ways can we do to participate?
So if since March until April, yes, we did send several cards actually, or reminders. So actually 5 reminders for people. But if you already filled out in the past or earlier, you don't need to you can, if you got another reminder, you don't need to respond again, just one response. And you can go online, right? So that's 2020census.gov or my2020census.gov, and you can respond in English or Tagalog. But also you can make a phone call, and just if you're more comfortable with making a phone call, you can call 844-330-2020 for English. And they actually made it available for Tagalog as well. And that's 844-478-2020. So pwede po kayong sumagot sa Tagalog kung mas komportable po kayong makipag-usap sa aming mga census representatives over the phone. And you just have to give them the information that is required by the census, and then you're done. And you can also, if you're one of those people who wants your paper questionnaire, that is still an option. And we actually just sent that out last April. And if you got that, please mail it back. You can fill it out at your own convenience. So it's so easy, it's so convenient to respond to the census. And if you're actually in the household na hindi pa nakatanggap, or you probably have a PO box, then we do advise you to please wait, because we will send you, or we will deliver your paper, your census questionnaire around mid-June. So right now, we're not doing the delivery yet for those who have PO boxes. So, but mid-June, we are hoping to start our operation again in the field.
Okay. And you bring up a question that I had in my mind is there's a lot of us who live in multi-generational households, or we are renting with several other families. So how does that work? So is it one per address? And then how do we participate if there's multiple families in one place?
That's a really great question. And it's always, it's a lot of, for us, that's our experience, right? So we have lolo and lola, or maybe different families in the house. So if you saw your census card and there's a census unique ID that is only for your household or for that address, that is only good for that household, right? So for that address. So we have to use that for everyone who lives in the house. So lahat po, from lolo to lola to babies, count them as well, because they count. And even for those who are renting in at your place. Actually, I have a really concerned caller, and he asked me, I am not in Hawaii right now. I want to be counted, but I am renting and I haven't received my invitation yet. And I asked him to please speak to his landlord, and if they can organize as a household to just have that one person go online or fill out the questionnaire, and count everyone that is, who are renting in her house, his or her house, so that they will be counted in that one census unique ID.
Yeah, and that's important. And I just wanted to follow up again. A lot of people are worried about being undocumented or their
That's
immigration
right.
status is
Mhm.
questionable. So what advice do you have? Because, people don't want to report and draw attention to themselves.
And I totally understand that. As an immigrant myself, I didn't hear about the census until I have to be honest, until I have to work for the Census Bureau. And I moved here in 2012. So I missed out obviously on the 2010, the 2010 count. So I never heard about it. And it's a real for experience for our people that they are, for our community. Yung may takot tayo, meron po tayong pagdududa o pagdadalawang isip. Is it safe? But I want to, and I'm very passionate about this as a Filipino census worker. Safe po at convenient and confidential ang inyong information. I understand if there are fears, but we want to let you know that there are laws that protect your information. Under Title 13 of the US Code, our information is protected. In fact, as a census worker, the first thing that we do before we even start to officially work for the census is to take an oath to protect people's information. So if there are any wrongful disclosures, that's actually imprisonment and even $250,000 in fine. And that's how seriously we take your information and the safety of the information that you're giving to us. We also don't share your information to any other agencies. Hindi po namin binibigay, bawal po yan sa batas. Na mag-share sa ibang agency. Our job really, ang trabaho po namin is to count you because you matter, you belong. We live in the same community and every one of us shares the benefits of the programs. Kung meron po tayong maayos na daan, lahat po tayo nakikinabang po dyan. So we're really hoping that even if hindi po namin pala tinatanong ang citizenship. Hindi po yan kasama sa question. So I know last year we were kind of dealing with, is the citizenship question going to be asked? It's not going to be asked. Your immigration status is not going to be asked. It is safe, it's confidential, wala pong mawawala sa inyo kung sasagutin niyo po ang census. Actually, there is so much more to gain because we're talking about the next 10 years of our community, the next 10 years of benefits. So I hope we all contribute and do our part and respond to the census.
Very good message, Annie, and I hope it calmed a lot of the fears that people have internally. I know it's unnerving to be without documentation, so
Definitely.
they can get past that and participate. Okay, let's bring back our panelists to go to our next topic. Landlord and tenant issues. That's a big topic for people that are out of work, unemployed right now, and can't pay their rent. So, I know there's a moratorium on evictions right now. Let's ask Phil first about what we know about, landlords who may be threatening people who aren't paying their rent or who may be locked out of their unit or, making these types of threats. What kind of recourse do they have?
Okay, so before I start, full disclosure, this is not my area of law. I would encourage everyone to go to the legal aid website, that is legalaidhawaii.org. I think they have very useful information there with respect to landlord-tenant issues. And after reading that website, to answer your question, my understanding is that there is, like you referenced earlier, there is a state moratorium on evictions that is good through May 29th. So there shouldn't be any new eviction proceedings initiated before that. And it also looks like for certain people, they may qualify actually under the federal moratorium on evictions that can last to July 26, 2020. So I think if you are in that situation, I would contact legal aid to see what information and resources they can provide you. They are also not allowed, your landlord is also not allowed to lock you out or shut off your utilities without a valid court order. So that means that in the event that your landlord does do that, that would be in violation of the law. And in order for them to actually legally do that, they would have to start a case in housing court, and that issue would need to be dealt there.
And also, there are resources out there for people who may need help for paying rent and their utilities. And I know the County of Honolulu has a program also to help people. Where can we find information on that, Phil?
Again, the main information or main resource that I look at is Legal Aid Hawaii. They have been, they've had a robust landlord-tenant program for, years now. And so their website, I think, is very useful in terms of that as well.
Great. And we have that information that you see on your screen now. So take that down, everyone, and you can direct your questions to Legal Aid Society. And I know there are several, these are free or low cost. So, legal expertise doesn't have to come as a very, expensive for our community as well. So, all right. So let's bring back Rhoda. Our next topic is economic issues, and going in that same vein of people not making any income and suffering through this pandemic. Who knows how long it'll last, being out of a job. So this scenario for you, Rhoda: I lost my job due to the pandemic. I am 65 years old, suffer from severe anxiety because of this lockdown, and I worry that I can't get back to work. And also my husband has a mountain of debt and bills. What can we do to ease our situation, and what legal options do we have?
Okay, thank you for that question, Annalisa. So, I researched the current unemployment rate in Hawaii, and it's we're at 22.3% in April, which is up by, I think, 1,000%, because it was 2.4% in March. So that means that 1 out of every 4 people in Hawaii are out of jobs. So the pandemic, we know, is a medical problem, but um, it also is a mental problem, because a lot of people get to suffer anxiety. They may not exhibit the coughs, the fever, and the shortness of breath, but definitely a lot have been showing symptoms of mental health problems. So what do you do with lenders or your mountain of debt if this is your situation? So one thing you can do is, first, try to contact your lender. Try to see if you can get a deferment or an extension of payment in your existing loans. Tell them about what happened to you and that you have been affected negatively by COVID. So that's number one. You can also look into debt consolidation or debt management companies. Some do this so that you can manage your debts without filing for bankruptcy. But a legal remedy that they can look into is whether or not they qualify for bankruptcy relief. Bankruptcy is a legal remedy where your legal debts, all your debts, are flushed or discharged. So it's a chance to have a fresh start. And so, Filipinos, they want to pay their debts. In fact, they don't get into credit card debts because they really want to pay everything in cash, because they feel like they might not remember when their due date is in their credit card, so they don't pay, so they don't borrow if they can. Yeah, but once they have all these debts, they can't sleep at night, and so it's enough to drive you over the edge or feel like you're a bad person because you can't pay your debts. Bankruptcy has that stigma, but it's actually a relief to relieve people of this anxiety brought on by the situation such as the pandemic or any health reason or unemployment. So there should be no stigma attached to that. And
But
they
it's
can look
important
into
to
that.
note that it will affect you going forward, yeah, for 7 years. Or how long does it stay on your record if you were to borrow or want to do something more later on? How long will that be with you?
It will affect your credit report, and it will stay there for 7 to 10 years. Uh, you can apply for bankruptcy multiple times. In fact, you can file for your next bankrupt discharge in bankruptcy up to 8 years after you file. So you can do it multiple times, but the thing is, it's a relief so that you don't feel like it's the end of the rope for you, or because people feel deeply about borrowing, and the fact that they cannot pay is affecting their mental health. So if it's reaching to that, first you have to consult a mental health professional. Secondly, you might just want to look into bankruptcy so that all this anxiety disappear.
And it's
And
important to consult a professional, right? Not to do it
right,
yourself. A legal
right.
professional.
So this one ties the physical effects of COVID-19 to the mental effects of COVID-19 and the legal remedies that can be availed of. But if it's a medical problem, they have to consult a medical professional.
Hmm. As well as legal for when you're talking about bankruptcies.
Right.
Okay. So, and then the other economic issue would be, estate planning, because, who knows with what's happening right now with COVID-19 and what will happen to you after you get sick or if you get sick. So, here's a scenario. I inherited some properties in the Philippines. My wife and I invested in a house in Hawaii. But with the pandemic, they want to make sure that the assets are in order no matter what happens. So how can they ensure that it is passed on to their children without any problems?
So, Annalisa, in the beginning, when we knew so little about the pandemic or COVID-19, everyone was just focused on surviving. You know, we have a Filipino word for that, mabuhay. So we all were just concentrating na tayo ay mabuhay. But now that we are, especially in Hawaii, we're very compliant with the safe at home and safer at home order. We can actually think on how we can take care of all these assets that we worked hard to accumulate during our lifetime. Do we just go and pass on to the next life, or do we actually fix it now that we know that life is so fragile uh, with our with this pandemic? So there are at least two types of transfer that can be done. In the Philippines, where we have civil law. It can be transferred inter vivos. Properties can be transferred inter vivos or mortis causa. Inter vivos means it's a lifetime transfer within your lifetime, and mortis causa means transfer in contemplation of death. So you can transfer your assets to your kids by way of a deed of donation, by way of a deed of sale. So that's an outright transfer. If you were thinking of transferring it and the transfer takes effect after death, then that would be in the form of a will. Okay, here in the US, trusts, living trusts are popular. So you can do that, and you can also do it through a will. And there's several ways how you can plan your estate so that there's no problems for those who are left behind when it comes to sorting out how much properties do we have, how many are in the Philippines, how many are here in the US. So it's something that they can work on while they're staying at home.
That's a good point, because right now we have a lot of us have more time to reflect and to plan. I know we tend not to be a culture that plans ahead. I think we like to live in the moment sometimes. So uh, this is a good time to reflect and take stock of what's going to happen to us in the future. So those were our set topics. And I wanted to take a moment to see if anyone had any Q&A. For those of you joining us on Facebook, please message your questions in the comment section. We'll try to ask it to our two legal experts here. And in the meantime, I did want to talk about something a little bit more interesting to me, is kind of the challenge of um, our immigrant population in terms of talking about these issues out loud. For example, there's a lot of undocumented immigrants that we call them TNT in the community, right? Tago ng tago. And they don't want to be counted. There's the fear, again, that we spoke about earlier with Annie. What would be the incentive for these people to really come out and report themselves? Because it really puts them in their mind in a state of being exposed, right? And makes them vulnerable when they're already very anxious about what's happening to them. And with COVID-19, it's an additional stress. So I wanted to get the legal experts' opinion on that. What do you guys think about their options?
You know, Annalisa, I'll take a bite of that
Take a
question.
bite.
So you know, this stimulus checks. There was some issue about why is my husband, who's an immigrant, not getting a stimulus check? You know, so they were wondering if that were true. The thing is, if you're legal, you are entitled to legal benefits. But if you stay undocumented, you work under the table, receive cash, and you don't get and you don't pay your sharing taxes, or you don't contribute to social security and all this. The thing is, once the stimulus checks or economic rebates are released, you can't get your share because you didn't contribute to the fund. So that's an incentive for them to become legal. That you're entitled to legal benefits if you processed your papers the correct way. The thing is, there's a stigma in being undocumented, and you feel like you cannot be legal at all. But there are remedies and reliefs, and all they have to do is explore these remedies so that should a remedy apply to them, that they can actually apply for it.
Hmm. What about Phil? Did you want to take a stab?
Well, I think this is more of a Annie's Kuliana. My understanding of the census in general is just that, it's important to be counted because it has an effect on what resources are provided to the community. So to the extent that, even though a person may be undocumented, that still means that if you're counted, certain resources can go towards the community because, just based on the numbers, there may be a need for it. So I think that's just my only sort of limited understanding in terms of the effect.
Yeah, and I think when we're reporting, how honest should we be? So Annie, we talked about this offline before about, if I'm the landlord of a building and I'm kind of harboring undocumented immigrants, that's how people would see that. And I'm not reporting it legally, all this income that I'm getting from, say, bed spacers or things like that. Um, why would I be part of this? I just don't feel like, I would again expose myself to legal recourse, like action against myself. How would you argue for that, I guess?
Thank you, Annalisa. Yes, and we touched this earlier, right, about the protection, the safety, and confidentiality of of the census. But if, for example, with that situation and you don't want to report that, I think we have to just remember the census is a head count that will help planners and government leaders decide um, to which community should we give these resources, who needs these resources the more, right? So that's why we're doing this head count, so we can get the fair share of federal funding that can affect our community and impact our community in the next 10 years. For example, you are a landlord, and you have that kind of situation and you feel like, I should not count everyone living here. There's really no, the census, that's not our job. We're not going to ask you, are those people supposed to be there? Are those people there? If they're there, they should be counted. We're not going to ask you any more other questions if it's a uh, legal way or not, I guess. So don't worry. There is no repercussion towards you by using the census. And actually, I would advise that if you are really concerned about people going into your household or address, for example, you do your count and you do your responses online. Online, you can actually do 99 entries. You can have 99 people there. So that's how many, that's how big the option is. So I would just do it online if you don't want strangers or people going in personally and
I was going to
interviewing
ask you,
you.
are you going to still knock on doors?
Yes, the census is known for the knocking on doors, right? So with the current situation with COVID-19 and all that, we halt all that. We are not on the field at the moment until, you know, we are following state and local guidance on that. We are, however, still planning to do follow-up. So we're hoping to do update leave, which is the delivering of the census materials to household for those who have PO boxes around mid-June, and then follow up on those people who did not respond to the census yet, even though they got all the reminders and their census questionnaire on August, around mid-August. So we highly encourage you all to participate now so that it's safer for all of us. Yeah, it's safer for our staff, it's safer for your household as well. So if we all proactively respond to the census, it's safer for everyone, and it's better for our community.
Okay. Well, and on that note, we have run out of time, but I want to take this moment again to thank all of you for joining us today. This was really informative for me, and I hope for all of our viewers who log on now and later, because it'll be up on all of our respective websites. So if you missed any part of this Facebook Live, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on all our respective Facebook pages. And I just want to again remind everyone that the partners for today were the Filipino Lawyers Association, the Filipino Complete Count Committee, FYLPRO. Thank you so much for being able to answer these questions for us. And we want to invite people again to follow the Filipino Complete Count Committee on Facebook to win those prizes that we heard about. we love a raffle, don't we? Thank you to attorney Philip Dureza, Rhoda Yabez Alvarez. Thank you so much, attorney, for joining us today. And again, this is called the Tsismisan Talk Story, and we have one. We're going to try to have one every other week. The next one is actually about the Catholic Church. They just opened churches actually today or yesterday on Oahu, and that one is on May 31st, 2020, from 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. And in addition to the FB Live, it will be actually on the radio on Oahu at KNDI Radio, as well as stations on Kauai and Maui. So please visit the Filipino Complete Count Committee page again for more information. And again, thank you to everyone. Shout out to the people behind the scenes. Of course, Banet, Miss Lucha, who organized all of this from the Count Committee, and Sergio Alcubila, Char McGuinness of FYLPRO. Thank you, everyone. You know, it's like a typical Filipino meeting. You have to make thank yous to everyone and kisses to everyone, mahalos to everyone. But appreciate you, all of you, for doing your work to help our community. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mahalo.
Thank
And,
you, Annalisa.
and I'm Annalisa Burgos. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on Chismisan.